Hey guys, it's Dean. Welcome to the Better Man podcast. In today's episode, we talk about mental health for men and how we can start making improvements in this much needed area of opportunity. Today's guest is Chewning, and he seems to have a gift for helping men be heard when it comes to their mental and emotional struggles. Today, we discuss getting away versus creating clarity, why being open and vulnerable and honest with why you need space for yourself instead of thinking about personal time or bro time as getting away is a much better solution to your relationship. We also talk about the epidemic of men not having enough intimacy with other men and how you can be the one to start initiating that change. We talk being vulnerable and communicating openly with loved ones and how this is a better way to do it than suppressing emotions and building resentment. Lastly, we get into the struggles of active and retired servicemen with a firsthand account from Chase, an Army veteran himself who has struggled with PTSD and who has lost multiple veteran friends to suicide. I love this episode because Chase is a guy who strives to be a positive example of masculinity while also understanding the need for the role of vulnerability, open communication, and traditionally non-traditional forms of masculinity, things that should be part of what we think about men being, but are not in this society. This episode is a fantastic example of what the Better Man podcast is all about. And if you're interested in living a healthier, more holistically healthy life, more fulfilled, more emotionally complete, happier, I know you want to listen to this episode. I hope this episode inspires you to be a better man. And if you haven't already, when this episode is finished, I invite you to leave. Okay, we're going to do that last paragraph again. This episode is a fantastic example of what the Better Man podcast is all about. And if you're interested in living a healthier, happier life as a man who is proud of himself for who he is, I know you'll want to listen to this one. I hope this episode inspires you to be a better man. And if you haven't already, I invite you to leave a review for this podcast when it's finished. All right, here we go. What's up, guys? It's Dean. Welcome to the Better Man podcast. Today, I am joined by a repeat guest who him and I had one of the best conversations we've had on the Better Man podcast so far. We got really deep into mental health. We talked about Chase's former experiences in the military, coming out of that, having PTSD, how he dealt with it, and all of the transformations that he's gone through, all the things that he's learned, all the practices that he has implemented, and the work that he is now doing with his incredibly popular podcast, Ever Forward Radio. So, Chase, thanks again for coming back on the show.
Oh, man, Dean, my pleasure. So glad to be here. Last time we got to kick it in person at what I like to call my geographical mistress. I feel like I'm always in Austin. So it was great to sit down with you, man. I'm glad to hear that message landed with you in the audience.
Yeah, man. Everybody's here. It's weird. I'll have like conversation with someone and they're like, well, next time you're down in Austin, let me know. I'm like, I live here. What are you doing here? I got here like 10 years ago before it really started blowing up. Yeah, like OG-ish. I mean, dude, it's totally different. If you've been to Austin like pre-2012 and then or pre-2013, even pre-2015, and then you go again like now and you're like, this is like a big city. This feels more like doesn't feel like New York, but it feels like, I don't know, it feels to me like LA. It feels like it's a lot different culture too. You know, you used to be able to just show up in sweatpants and you were good, and now you actually have to like put on a shirt.
So I've been coming there since probably like 2006. We talked about in our last podcast, my last duty station, I was in San Antonio, Texas. And I never really San Antonio was all right, in my opinion, but I always kind of felt a pull. I enjoyed Austin. I visited one time with some friends. I think we're on like a long weekend. And yeah, I was hooked. I was going to Austin a lot back in the day. So going 2006 through 2009, before I separated San Antonio, separated the military, to come back now, you know, what's that, like 15 years later, something like that. It's definitely changed even more, but I still love it. I come back there every so often.
Yeah, I mean, it beats Midwestern weather, so you know.
Yeah.
I'm here for it. So we had a really good conversation last time, and I think if people haven't listened to that episode already, um, totally fine. But would you mind just catching us up on, I don't know, the 2 to 3 minute rundown of Chase Chewning's journey through mental health and PTSD, and what you learn about yourself in the process?
A lot. That's to say the least. So really, my mental health journey is one kind of like out of necessity, or my hand was really forced, and nobody or no one else other than myself forced my hand. And what I mean by that is, after the military, I enrolled in school. I was kind of starting my life all over again, professionally, quite literally, physically. I was rehabilitating from some pretty gnarly injuries, and I was going through I think right about the end of my undergrad career, and starting my new life again, my new adulting career. And I was starting in a new relationship that was extremely meaningful to me, and was she was the one. She's now my wife. And all these kind of
Congrats.
thank you.
I don't know if that's relatively new, but congrats.
No, we've been married actually, this year will be 7 years actually.
Oh,
But we've been,
wow.
yeah,
Okay.
we've been
Well,
together
congrats
a total of
anyways.
about 10 years. I'll take it. Thanks, man. And
Yeah.
so yeah, this was circa like 2015.
Hmm.
And I, on the surface, on the outside, was doing all of these right things that I think a lot of us can relate to. I'm pursuing higher education. I'm in a meaningful, committed relationship, or I'm very happy in my relationship status, whatever that might be. I'm climbing the corporate ladder. I just moved from Richmond up to Northern Virginia. I was going into DC. I was getting promoted. All of these things. I was the strongest I had ever been physically. I was even the leanest I had ever been. So a lot of things on the outside looking in were wins. I was checking the boxes. I was like, got the girl, got the job, got the body, got the, social
Hmm.
life, got all these things. But the thing about mental health is that it's not just literally something in our head. It's something that when it goes unchecked for, at least in my experience, a significant period of time, we do begin to unfortunately have these kind of physiological manifestations. And now,
Hmm.
again, in my experience, I was undiagnosed PTSD at the time, and I was just chronically suppressing very, very extreme emotions. And it won. One day, it just won in the form of probably like the most severe panic attack that I've ever experienced. And I say severe because eyes rolling in the back of my head, hyperventilating to the point of my chest just completely concaving in.
Oh,
Luckily,
wow.
my, then girlfriend, now wife, was with me at the time. She's a nurse. So, she was kind of very aware of the situation. She actually thought I was going into a seizure. Um,
Mm.
and she was just like, what the hell happened here, Chase? And what it was, that we were watching this movie, and there was a death scene that was almost identical to the one that I witnessed with my father. That is the root cause of my PTSD. And
Mm.
I just completely blacked out. I had no idea. All of a sudden, she was like over top of me trying to resuscitate me. And all I thought was we were just watching a movie. Now, all of a sudden, like, I can't breathe. I'm laying down on the couch, drenched in sweat, and she's like shaking me, trying to wake me up.
Whoa.
And that was quite literally my body screaming, finally screaming to get my attention, to go, Chase, none of this other stuff matters, because you have not yet addressed this. And
Hmm.
this is a way bigger thing than you are making it out to be. And that was the physical and literal and emotional and mental and even spiritual wake up call that I needed, because it also rattled my cage in terms of my relationship. My girlfriend, May, at that time there, she realized that this was such a significant part of my life that, she wanted me to work on, and more specifically, needed me to work on, because we had
Hmm.
kind of danced around it before. She knew where my head and my heart was at in terms of, my father's death, and, how I'm being able to, commit to healing and working on myself in a lot of other ways. But she's like, Chase, I need you to work on this. I want you to work on this for you. But more specifically, I want all of you to be healed, or at least on the path to healing. if we're going to be committing our lives to each other. Like, this is a very extreme thing going on that you're clearly not working on. And so that was my body waking me up to the necessity of mental health work. And honestly, Dean, if I didn't have her kind of, in a way, kind of pass back that relationship ultimatum of like, hey, you need to work on this, or I don't know what we're going to do. I was more concerned about losing her and our relationship suffering than I was about taking care of myself. And that was just true to form for my mental health protocol for years. And, maybe somebody can relate to that. Sometimes taking care of ourselves, we don't care about as much. But when it comes to doing it for the sake of someone else, like a partner, like a loved one, like a family member, that was more meaningful for me. So that's what really snapped me to. And I then began to just make mental health work a priority, getting back into regular therapy, journaling, brain dumping, just honestly not shutting up. I realized, okay, this is turning into something because I've been suppressing and I've been like holding in this beach ball that has been this traumatic event, and it's finally come up for air. So I began to just talk about it. I was like, if suppressing it has not helped me, what if I just opened up to myself, to people that I love and trust? And, that's been kind of my journey ever since, quite literally, because now I don't shut up. And that's, I think a big reason what kind of got me interested in podcasting and everything I'm doing now.
That's a perfect that's an ideal career shift then, if you can't shut up. But like that resonates with me so much, because I think that at least my experience, whether I consciously or subconsciously learned it, was that my role as a man was to kind of just suck it up and like do what I needed to do, right? Suck it up, do your homework, suck it up, like do all the things that you're committed to, suck it up, be the one who works extra hard. And a lot of that, has served me extremely well. Like I wouldn't be the athlete that I was. I wouldn't be, I wouldn't have the level of success that I currently have. I wouldn't be who I am without, the without this kind of internal driver to always just like
It's a
just
fuel
to
source.
keep doing
Absolutely.
things.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But at some point it gets to this point where I'm taking on too many things. I'm taking on too many burdens, and I'm not stopping and saying, this is too much for me. Like, I don't like, this doesn't feel good anymore. Like, I can take on more and more and more. I remember my friend was getting married, and his friend, the best man, I was at the bachelor weekend, he was asking me about the girl that he was getting married to. And he's like, is he going to treat her well? And I was like, what does it matter? Like, he's going to be fine. Like, he'll shoulder all of it. Like, it doesn't matter. He's going to be the rock. He's going to do what needs to be done. It doesn't matter if he's happy, or like, not that he's not happy, but it doesn't matter if he's like, he just needs to do what he's supposed to do,
It
and
doesn't
that's
matter
it.
if it's too much or if it's too much or too long. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it was just like, so for me now, I'm very, I don't know if it's the same, but it's similar in the sense that my kind of thing now is I'm trying to reaffirm the importance of like taking care of myself and justify that. And I still have a lot of conversations with people where, like, I'll give you an example. Like a couple of weeks ago, or a few weeks ago, right before my wife gave birth, she was in the hospital, and I was like, well, I'm
Congrats again,
not
by the way.
doing. Thank you. Thank you. She is, sometimes she is awful, and sometimes the baby. Sometimes she is awful, and sometimes she is great. So, that's newborn life. But
Yeah.
I was, my wife was in the hospital, just kind of keeping her just in case the pregnancy developed, and they had to induce labor. Um, but I decided, like, well, she's in the hospital. I'm going to go take care of myself, because I know that I'm not going to be getting much sleep. I'm not going to have much time over the next few weeks. So I decided to go for a hike. And initially, like, my wife was like, "Oh, I'm in the hospital and you're hiking. Sounds right." She
Mm-hmm.
she wasn't happy initially, and then I had a call with my dad. Like, as I was hiking, I was like, "Yeah, I decided I would go out and like kind of take care of myself." He's like, "Well, if you can justify that somehow, then okay." But it's like there's these, we still don't, I don't know, and maybe you're listening, you're like, no, Dean, you shouldn't have gone on a hike. But like for me, like, I think it made sense for me to go on a hike to take care of myself in that situation. And I think we need to make more of an effort to normalize this idea of taking care of ourselves, because
Mm-hmm.
ultimately
Oh yeah.
it makes us better for all the people around us. Like if I'm an angry person, like, I could be at home and helping, but are you going to want my help if I'm just like pissed off about it?
Right.
You
Exactly.
know?
Yeah.
So that's why it's kind of cool to hear that, before we started this call, it's kind of cool to hear that you've had more of these conversations with other men.
Mm.
Not necessarily the main focus, but somehow you got into this topic of mental health with other men, and realizing like, oh, you know what? I'm actually better at all the things that are important to me when I focus on my mental health. So I wanted to ask you about
Mm-hmm.
some of those conversations that you've had, and that realization that when we do take care of our mental health, other things get better too.
Yeah. I want to say first by kind of like talking about what happens after when I talk about this stuff. And I think this
Mm,
is an important realization that regardless of what we're talking about here, what we say, how we say it, and to whom we say it, take note of their impression, of how that imprints on them, of how they light up or how they retract, how they lean in or how they, kind of turn away. How someone physically, verbally, energetically responds to what we say, I think is a really important indicator of like it's getting a good pulse on that conversation. And also if we're in tune, if we were even in attunement in that conversation with that person, that then is an opportunity, is the permission that person is giving us to share more and to most likely help or just leave a little breadcrumb to a clue that is a resource for them to scratch that itch and to stay more curious and hopefully ultimately find help, find meaning, find something that fulfills them. And what
mhm,
I mean by that is whenever I've had these conversations in person, on the podcast or on other shows, it is the conversation we have after that just really blows me away. After we
mm,
stop recording, of I was not expecting that answer. I was so pleasantly shocked to hear you talk about how focusing on your mental health has actually made you healthier, has actually contributed to more success in business or the right pivot. And not even just with the other person. I've been in some situations. Actually, one that comes to mind in a big way, excuse me, is I was recently a couple months ago. I was in New York City, and I was sitting down with a former guest of Everforward Radio, Michael Chernow. He has a show called Creatures of Habit, and his entire brand, his theme, his messaging, his content is all around the healthy habits we have in the day. What
mm,
healthy habits can we create, or what habits do we have maybe that we're aware of or not fully aware of that we want to get rid of or do less of?
mhm,
And he asked me this question of what's one habit that you like, I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but basically it was like, what is one habit you have that you have been like trying to get rid of,
mhm,
or you're glad that you actually have worked on like letting go of this habit? And up to that point, we were talking about sleep hygiene, getting out on walks, just little healthy habits that stack conditions in your favor for your general wellness.
mhm,
And I told him, I said, I stopped keeping things to myself. I stopped suppressing my emotions and I started really opening up to the right people. And then it even kind of turned into, specifically with other men.
mm,
And that just really like took him back. There was like a hard pause in the conversation, and the whole crew afterwards, the videographer and the audio operator afterwards, both came up to me, both guys, and were just like thanked me for bringing this up, for saying for too long I had kept things that were detrimental to my health, that were hard to swallow on my own, that were, deeply emotionally aggravating, frustrating, traumatizing even,
Mhm.
because they said the same thing, like, that's me. And so I'm hearing you say this is a breath of fresh air, so thank you. I'm so thankful for you kind of sharing that and letting other guys, letting other people hear this.
Mhm.
And that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like the example I shared earlier with my wife of, her snapping me to attention and my body snapping me to attention.
Mhm.
I had to pay attention to this. So I kind of just did the opposite. And doing the opposite in my mental health is really my personal secret sauce. For
Mhm.
literally over a decade, I ran in the other direction of facing my father's death. I ran in the other direction of addressing anything that I experienced during his illness, during his death, during my time in the military. And so, what did I do to work on that? I made the conscious decision to turn and face it. I
Mhm.
ran back towards it. And it didn't mean that I was any less scared. It didn't mean that I, all of a sudden just lost all fear. It just meant that I finally, God's honest truth, just stopped being a coward and I leaned into
Mhm.
courage. And
Yeah.
courage does not mean the absence of fear. It
Mhm.
is acting in spite of being afraid. And
Mhm.
I think that's exactly what I had to do. And I would be willing to bet for most people, for a lot of people, I think leaning into courage could be the catalyst that you need, or maybe even that you want, but you don't know how to really go
Mhm.
after these hard things. And then on top of that, what I did was I just began to open up. And so
Mhm.
I was like, okay, if I've been running from these things, also caveat that with suppressing things, if I turned and faced them and I also opened up about them to myself and to other people, um, I should say, take inventory of, opening up to the right people, because
Mhm.
sometimes we do get shut down and sometimes we become more traumatized, or we internalize things more by opening up to somebody that doesn't really reciprocate or can't hold that emotional container, that space for us, and we feel um, made fun of, or we feel scared, or we feel like
Mhm.
we made a fool of ourselves. We don't feel loved. We don't feel safe. So, it's kind of
Mhm.
taking inventory of opening up to the right people, I think, is very important. And so that's also what I did. And
Mhm.
I did that by, I did it with and for myself first. And I was saying earlier, journaling, brain dumping thoughts, and just getting
Mhm.
into streams of consciousness, writing it down, speaking it out loud, recording it, so that
Mhm.
I could first and foremost become aware, and familiar with and adjust to thoughts and feelings that I knew that I had, but just wasn't vocalizing. But once you kind of get into that state, there are thoughts and feelings that come out that I was like, holy shit, I, who did that come from? How did that come
Mhm.
out of me? So that was a huge indicator that, Chase, there's a lot more to work on here. And I leaned into that. And then once I really had something tangible, or could formulate a straight thought as to, this hurts me, I think it's related to this, or this is what, this event or this thing is making me, how it's making me feel. Once I could
Mhm.
really familiarize myself with the action, with the emotion, and kind of convey it into a sentence and words with and for myself first,
Mhm.
but then share that with somebody that I really loved, trusted, and respected, it was like really next level help. And so that's what has honestly, over the years now, has given me the most profound levels of healing, is continuously doing that on public platforms, on my social media, on my
Mhm.
podcast, even just, talking with somebody in real life. I've become almost, maybe to a fault, such an anti small talker, that
Mhm.
it like bothers me. Don't talk to me about the weather. That's so
Mhm.
obvious. Like, that's just, I'm kind of going straight to the point, of,
Yeah.
like, literally, like, I'm going to share with you something that I found, when I share something first, more meaningful than, oh, wow, it's raining.
Mhm.
That immediately is like a barometer. Weather joke here, I guess, is a barometer for that other person opening up as well. So I'm going to get a
Mhm.
quick pulse as to, I just shared something that, when they ask me, hey, how was your morning? And I tell them, it was, honestly, it was really rough. It was really rough.
Mhm.
I was just feeling, for some reason, really down, and that's really weird for me. And, I just
Mhm.
struggled kind of getting into my normal routine this morning. It can be something as simple as that. other than just the general, yeah, great, good, awesome. And if that gets reciprocated at all, and that person then opens up to me about, yeah, I've been there, I feel exactly the same way, or they ask a question, so why is this different for you, or what did you do to get out of it? Then the channels of communication open up. And what we're actually talking about is, we're sharing emotional health, we're sharing mental health experiences. And it's great because it doesn't quite look like what a lot of us think it has to look like. A lot of us think that it has to look like breaking down and sobbing and crying and, revisiting painful memories, or
Yeah,
even
the
just in a professional
extremes.
setting. Exactly. But, we can baby step our way to that scenario, and that might be an appropriate avenue. But first and foremost, it starts with getting clarity of these events and emotions in ourselves, sharing them with people in the right environment, the safe, trusted environment, and then see what gets reciprocated.
Hmm.
Sometimes there's no answer, no solution, but I guarantee you, walking away from that conversation, you're going to feel a little bit better because you just opened up in a little bit way. Little bit way.
Hmm.
It's not, I'm not wording good right now, but you opened up a little bit, and that is going to then
Hmm.
give that person permission. And can I share one quick example before, I kind of pass it back to you, man?
Yes,
Uh,
I have my list of counterpoints. I think I'm ready. I've probably
th-
lost a few of them, but keep going.
this example popped in my mind that I think is so poignant to what I'm talking about, to the point of avoiding small talk. I want meaningful small talk. If we're going to be conveying words, exchanging words for a
Hmm.
short period of time, I would rather it be a little bit more meaningful than the weather, personally.
Yeah, like exactly the
And
opposite of how we started this podcast talking about Austin.
but here we are. Here we are.
We
Um,
made it. We got here eventually.
so I took an Uber to one of my last in person psychotherapy sessions. I went through several rounds of ketamine assisted psychotherapy in a clinic here in LA last year, and I took an Uber to go there. And I got in the car, and the driver started talking about the weather and the traffic, as one does.
Yeah.
And he then was like, traffic was really crazy, I think. So he was asking, like, where are you going? Maybe, I might know a different way. And I told him specifically where I was going, the clinic, and like the all the information's in the name. And so he was just very intrigued.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Oh, may I ask, what is that?" And so I then told him what it is, what they do, why I'm going,
Hmm.
to specifically work. I'm in a treatment session for my PTSD, and just been really prioritizing my mental health. This man, he was probably mid late 60s. He almost like stopped the car. He like turned back to me and looked, and in a way that was just like, he looked at me as if he knew me. He looked at me as if finally someone looked at him and saw him and knew him. There was just this moment of common ground
Mm.
exchanged. He then began to tell me, you know, I'm now sober for the first time in like over 20 years. He like showed me,
Hmm.
like, I think he had his like 6 month chip or something.
Hmm.
And he then began to open up to me about how that cost him his marriage, and what
Mm.
being addicted to alcohol and these other substances had done to his life, but what he's working on now. The whole rest of the car ride, we talked about what he probably was most afraid to talk about. And
Hmm.
so that little permission slip of me opening up about what I'm doing with my life and how I'm working on mental health, especially with another man,
Hmm.
I think, I mean, who knows? I haven't seen this guy since, so who knows really what happened? But I can just tell you
Hmm.
that experience I had in the Uber when he dropped me off. He got the information of the clinic, and maybe he might be in pursuit of healing in that way now, or at least got curious about other ways and saw another man,
Hmm.
actively in pursuit of serious mental health treatment.
Hmm.
But more than that, okay to talk about it. And so I just want to be okay to talk about it, because the more I
Yeah.
talk about it, it feeds back into me, and it helps me immensely. It's not like better than thou situation. It's, I'm talking about it because no one else is. It's truly healing for me. And the more that I voice it out loud, it prompts me for the next thing to work on, or the next thing to really focus on keeping. Um, like anything, the more that we can share what we're doing, how we're doing it, why we're doing it, I think it feeds back into us to want to keep doing it, to keep making it better. But then it opens up channels of communication, and even, dare I say, hope for the other person who maybe wants to work on something similar.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you have this amazing gift for being able to connect with people and explain your situations, your struggles in a way that allows them to feel like connected with you and gives them permission to explore their own struggles and voice them aloud. And the thing that I was thinking of, on a personal level, I think the irony of what we do with, because I have this experience with writing my blogs years ago, and starting writing blogs years ago and doing social media. And there you have this there's this ironic situation where we tend to be more intimate and we tend to be more intimate with our emotions when we're in
Hmm.
like this situation, like you and me
Hmm.
having this conversation here. Whereas, like, if I'm hanging out with my best friend, we might be talking about something surface level,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
not having these conversations here. And so something that I've tried doing is, just going to that place with them, and it's on the but something that I think I miss is I jump straight to, here's what's going on with my marriage right now, instead of like, okay, let's talk about some like low to medium intensity things, and then
Absolutely.
like let's also do some high intensity things. But like
Yeah.
I think that men, you and I discussed this before, I think that men are so starving for intimacy with other men in a non-sexual way,
Absolutely.
that
Yeah.
like we crave that so much that we, I feel like I don't need like these little doses of like connection. I need like a gallon. Like I need
Yeah.
like an overload connection
Give
right
me the
now. And
fire
so I'm
hose
gonna like,
sometimes, really.
exactly. So like I'm gonna go there. And I even noticed the same thing, like trying to have, when I'm with my dad, he's just such a quiet guy, and I'm hanging out with him and we're just sitting there in silence. And I'm like, I really want to talk about something with you, but like I don't know how.
Mm.
I've spent 30 years not talking with you. Like I don't know how to even begin to have a conversation with you where I talk
Damn.
about like things that are like that are deep. So so first off, I sympathize with that. The other few things that came up as you were talking. So first off, like we're probably familiar with the concept of journaling. I've talked about journaling a lot. I think
Mm.
it's amazing. But you talked about recording yourself and then listening back to yourself, because that adds a whole depth to
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
because you can actually see like the emotion. You can see, I wonder if you even recorded your face while doing it. You can like see the emotion in your face as you're giving yourself this monologue. And that would be, to me, that just seems like it would be an amazing tool to understanding yourself.
Mm.
Like, um, more so than journaling. I mean, wow. Giving clarity to your emotions, it's so important. And that's something that um, you don't do unless you're like really trying to do it, or you're doing like
Hmm.
a
Hmm.
deliberate or a conscious practice um, to really work on exploring yourself. And then the last part of what I was hearing, um, you are no stranger to doing things that are difficult, right? I think and and I'm no stranger to working hard, to doing difficult workouts, right, to pushing
Hmm.
myself in terms of my business. But like there are things that are hard for us we that we might not think of as like, oh, like I'm going to be a super brave guy and I'm going
Hmm.
to go do, I'm going to go explore my emotions and like actually say how I'm feeling. Like, yes, that isn't like, to give some Marvel references, because my wife and I are currently watching Marvels as we're going through the entire Marvel universe as we,
Oh,
as
that's
we,
amazing.
as
You're
we
like
feed
in
our
the right
newborn.
chronological order. You bounce around the movies and stuff.
I hope so. I hope we're going in the right order. I don't know. We're on Captain Amer- No, we're on Avengers Civil War right now.
Oh,
So
Captain America:
that's
Civil War. Yeah,
Thank you. Captain America
what's one of my
Civil War.
favorites? So good, dude.
That's a good one. But we are. Oh God, I lost my spot. But like, wait, what was I saying? But the point is, like, the whole point of me saying that is like,
Like, leaning into like hard things. No stranger
oh
to doing
yeah,
hard things. Yeah.
so like we think of bravery as like Captain America, right? Like saving the day, like doing something, like risking physical harm. But the other form of bravery is like doing something, like leaning into an emotion that makes you
Mm.
uncomfortable. Like that's where there's not a lot of opportunity for most of us on a daily basis to lean into bravery to save someone like who just who just fell off a bridge into a water, or
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
like rushing into, a war zone to try and, save a child. But there are opportunities for bravery to express our emotions. And that's not what we typically see as something that's masculine, or is
Mm,
like you know, that's what's going to make me feel really good about myself. But ultimately, that is the area of opportunity for most, typical men, most traditional men,
hmm
is like getting into those emotions and saying something that is scary. You're not sure how people are going to respond. You're not sure what they're going to think of you. For me, like I'm someone who like if I cried at a movie, my wife would look at me and be like, "What is wrong with you right now? Like, what's happening?" And every
Wow. Really?
Pixar movie makes me tear up. I love
Oh,
Pixar movies. They all have an
dude, they
amazing
tug on the
message to
heartstrings
them.
like crazy, man.
They
Yeah.
know what they're doing. It's an
hmm
entertaining movie for kids, and it's like tugging at the heartstrings for adult. But like there is so much internal resistance to me, like feeling those emotions and exploring, like actually giving into those emotions, is a form of bravery that I think most men can really benefit from. So that's that's what came up to me as you were talking, and I think you had some really awesome points.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Dean. And really to kind of your last point there, when talking about bravery and our experience or lack thereof experience, doing hard things, jumping into uncertain situations, whether that's um, a war zone or a burning building or just uncharted territory in your life, in your job, in your relationship. Um, for me personally, how I think I got a leg up with bravery and courage and what was quite literally imprinted on me for years was those things are easier when I have an unshakable foundation of trust.
Hmm.
What I mean by that is I I I I feel fearless. I feel like in 99.99% of situations that life can throw my way, and I mean that quite literally in any situation, I sure might get stressed, might get frazzled, might get worried, but there is an unshakable level of trust in myself, in my environment, in the tools that I have, and the people that I surround myself with that allows me to be brave, to be courageous. Because of my time in the military, I really had no other choice. In basic training and in my years of active duty, and in every scenario, real world or training that I saw, my actions really were fueled by two things, which ultimately is still one thing, but the trust that I had in the men and women to the left and right of me, also coupled with the trust in the equipment that we were using. Um, and then, their trust in me, and then knowing that I trusted them.
Hmm.
And so, I mean, a really simple example was, we would go into the gas chamber to test all of our, um, they call it mop gear, but basically your gas mask and all of this gas warfare equipment. And you go in and everything, and you're fine. It's weird. I've never been, in a gas chamber before. I'm breathing. Sure, it's a little bit more stressful. It's fine. It's okay, but I'm not dying.
Hmm.
And then what they have you do is they have you take all your mop gear off. They have you remove the gas mask so that you know what that feels like. And it does not feel good for quite a while. But what that does is give you an unshakable level of trust in having your equipment on you, knowing how to use it, how to apply it. So there's this trust developed with this thing that I know its purpose. And its purpose, when I treat it and I respect it correctly and I service it and I maintain it and I honor and nurture that relationship, just like with the guy or the girl to the left or right of me, they're going through the same training as me. They have the same weapons qualifications as me. They, have these same skill sets that I do, so that it doesn't really matter if the shit hits the fan or how worried or scared I get. Is because their responsibility is, they're never going to leave me behind. And they know that about me as well. So it's this level of trust that I do feel like gave me kind of this leg up that, no matter how many times I've been on the range, in a gas chamber, jumping out of an airplane, shooting or being shot at, or, anything like that. I have had that level of trust in other people, them and me. And quite frankly, like, thank God I'm still here. So no matter what I have been through, to the smallest level, the smallest stressor, to the most extreme, death defying, life challenging one, I did not die. I might have walked away with a few bumps and bruises, or in my case, some significant injuries, but I'm thankfully here, alive. Nothing that I went through to date, 37 years later, has killed me. And I think, to quote one of my favorite Stoics, this applies to a lot of us, outside of the military and everyday life. Seneca says that we suffer far more in our imaginations than in reality. And not to discredit anyone, with, anxiety or just, whatever. But if we really get real with ourselves, we are suffering for far too long in our own minds, unnecessarily, I believe, than is actually happening in real life. How many times I would get on the other side of that trying situation and go, oh shit, like that wasn't that bad. Like, okay, of course, that's hindsight, but like, I'm not dead. I have gone through this experience. I now have this knowledge. I also have this trust with myself, with my equipment, with the tools at my disposal, with the people that I went through this with, that needs to always be a part of the equation. And to bring it back to what we were talking about here, I think for a lot of guys, we might have the right tools, or we're developing them. Hopefully this conversation is one of them to and for ourselves. But also a part of that equation, part of the tools, is other guys. There are so many things in life that, how many times do our wives, or, other girls or sisters or moms or whatever, they've got their girlfriends, they've got this group, they've got this support group, they've got that camaraderie. Guys, unless we're on the police force, in the fire department, in the military, or in some kind of like very heightened, stressful experience, a lot of us don't have that. That's no one else's reason other than like us not cultivating and curating those relationships, not leaning into, there's these couple guys in my life that we do kind of have these conversations. So let me have the courage to lean into that more, and maybe open up more, or invite them, let's create a small men's group. Let's do something more than just, pound beer and watch the game, which is a great stepping stone into maybe something meaningful. But I'm all for, let's normalize meaningful small talk. Let's normalize meaningful, meaningful get-togethers that can be more than just, the typical stuff that a lot of guys do. We think that is bonding. We think that is quality, meaningful time. And I'm not knocking it. It's just because I'm not really a big sports guy. But like, look, just getting quality time with other guys is a stepping stone. How do you hit a PR in the gym? How do you deadlift, 405 pounds? You start with the bar, so you got to work your way up. We need to develop, we need to trust ourselves. We need to trust the process. We need to develop trust, and nurture trust. Trust isn't just a thing that you get and you have. It takes maintenance, just like every other tool and asset I was talking about in the military. We need to develop and nurture and maintain meaningful relationships and trust with other men, so that we get that reciprocated. This is almost like a selfish thing, but you need it. I need it. I need to let you know that I care about you. I need to let you know that you can trust me, so that we can kind of gauge and grow together, that I'm also getting that in return. There's just something so unique about this trust process, and opening up, that is so unique to the guy experience, that I think a lot of us are missing, or not getting regularly enough, that feeds into it. Is a massive part of the recipe, the formula for specifically male mental health, that I think if a guy listening right now gets very real and honest with themselves as to maybe doing a lot of these other things, but you don't have this, and you're still kind of feeling short of that threshold, you're falling short maybe of your own personal goals, your personal measure for success and happiness, I'd be willing to bet that this might be the missing thing.
Yeah. I mean, the last time that I had a really, when I'm thinking of, I didn't, actually, I was in the military I did Army ROTC for a year.
Oh, no way. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I was at airborne school I did airborne camp in Fort
All the
Benning.
way.
I did. And that was where I learned, you were talking about the gas mask, but honestly, when I was at airborne school, I was convinced that I could jump out of a plane. And as long as I used the proper technique and my parachute didn't deploy, I would just roll and I'd be fine. Like I was,
That
they
is a
drilled
level
that.
of trust that I'm talking about. That is that
Yeah.
you can't that's amazing, man. Like you can't
Yeah.
explain that. It's just it's annoying, but you had to
Yeah.
do that yourself for yourself.
Right. There was so little sleep, and there was so many times where we practiced, the proper whatever landing technique that I
Have
was
your
like,
knees recovered from the airborne shuffle yet?
yeah, I honestly, I was luckily fine from that. I think the more what the yeah, I wasn't a fan of like, running long distances in combat boots. That
Yeah, I'm
wasn't
with
like
you.
this. Like I had the standard issue. I didn't like buy the good ones, so like I had just like standard issue combat boots that were like, terrible. Um,
Yeah.
I was
I
young
made
enough
that
that I
mistake
that
too.
I
You got to
yeah.
level up on a pair of boots.
Yeah, I was young enough that I got away with it. But I don't want to talk too much about that because I'm not like I only did like 1 year of ROTC. I got the airborne,
But you got that
experience.
experience. You got
Then
that
that
level
was
of
like,
trust. You did
yeah,
hard things.
yeah. And the other experience that I had that for me the really big experience where I was with other men, or I guess we could say boys, was the my experience with sports. That
Mm,
was like that was probably the last time that I really had like regular interaction, like on multiple times per week with a group of men. So when I was in college, I had a few guy friends from my lacrosse team, few teammates from my lacrosse team that I really hung out with. I lived with a couple of the guys. And then when we went out, when we had fun, like it was with those same guys.
same group, yeah.
So we're seeing each other like, 7 times a week. And then I moved to Austin, and, I had guy friends here a lot. And what really changed was when I met my now wife, and we started hanging out a lot more. There was less and less interaction with groups of men. I
Mm,
thought that like, I don't know what if I had to like put my finger on like what I guess it doesn't matter. What the end result was, I wasn't hanging out with men as much, and I
uh-huh.
should have prioritized that more. Thought I shouldn't have avoided doing that because I thought it would make my wife think that I loved her less because I was hanging out with other men. And I
That's
think
a
that
huge catch.
as
Yeah.
and I think that as men partner up or get married, they hang out less and less with groups of men. And then when you have kids, you hang out with groups of men even less. So,
Hmm.
like, this is something I had this conversation with Alex Holmes, who is he's a British journalist who focuses on men's health. He has a book called the book is escaping me right now, but he has a whole book on men's mental well-being, and talks about all these trends and why men don't have optimal levels of mental well-being. And big thing that he said is like, yeah, after men get married, they tend to like drop off. Their male relationships just like totally drop off because they're spending time with their partners, they're spending time
Which
with their
totally makes
kids.
sense. Like, and absolutely, there's going to be a shift. There's going to be a
Yeah.
shift.
Yeah, and there's going to be a shift, but I think the right thing to do, or what we should be
Mm,
doing, is we should also prioritize, having those guy times. Like, don't make it like, don't be an asshole. Don't like make guy weekend where you
yeah.
go out and you get shit faced and then you go to the bars and you're a terrible husband. But like, you can do other things. You can go hiking together. You can like that was a lot of my bachelor party. I took us up to Bear Lake, Utah. Like no
Oh, wow.
nightlife, nothing whatsoever. But we were in a cabin. It was just us. It was bro time. It was fantastic. So
You know,
anyways,
Dan, I think you're hitting on some really great points, man. I want to go back to what you're saying about um, not having, we don't prioritize that as much as maybe we get older, or as we
Hmm.
get into a long-term, meaningful, committed relationship or marriage or partnership or whatever. Um, a couple things come to mind for me that have really helped me not lose touch of that or with that in my marriage, and is something that I think has another underlying issue that potentially holds a lot of detriment to partnerships and marriages, and especially yourself, and that's
Hmm.
resentment. But first, I think there's a better way to go about it. There's a better way to go about it, of that can support both bro time, meaningful quality guy time, and can support a meaningful relationship or partnership or marriage at the same time. We need to get away from what we believe or has been the model for so long as the standard typical outlet for getting guy time.
Hmm.
What I mean by that is it's viewed, at least in my experience and my perspective of the world, it's viewed as we need to go hit the golf course, we need to go to a game, we need to go to a bar, we need to get away from our wives, we need to get away from our relationship, we need to get away.
Hmm.
I don't think that perspective serves us, because
Hmm.
what are we really saying there? If I need to carve out time to go hang out with you, Dean, and some other guys because I need to get away from my life, my marriage, my relationship, what I'm saying is like I'm not happy here. If we want to
Hmm.
get away from anything, like we need to escape it. Why? Is it really that bad? Like, why is it
Hmm.
bad? Why do we feel the need to run away from something that we have chosen? And I think our life partner, our spouse, that is the most important decision we will ever make. So
Hmm.
ultimately, what is that saying about our choice, our decision? If that is not the most important person, if that is not the most important choice you have ever made in your life, and you're choosing to get away from that,
Hmm.
I would challenge you to revisit the choices you're making in your life. There
Right.
might
So
be
if you're
something
like,
going on
so if you're
there.
saying get away, that not only is that bad for you because you're looking at your life as something that you don't like and you need to get away from, like how does that make your spouse feel, right? If that's like
Exactly.
if that's what's going on in your head, how does that make your partner feel when you're like, it's guy time, I need to get away for like a few hours, like I need to get away for
Exactly.
some time. So what's the alternative? Like how do you what's your
Well, what
recommendation?
happens for us is just really it comes down to effective communication. It's, hey, I don't present it as, hey, there's mandatory guys' night, or hey, we're going to do whatever, whenever, wherever. It's, usually prompted by, I haven't seen Daryl, Colin, Felipe, Max. I haven't seen all these guys in my life, in a little while, babe. I think we're going to plan a little trip. I've been connected with them since the wedding, since our last trip, getting more in tune with exactly how I feel and what is the truth instead of just
Hmm.
going to surface level. I got to get away, surface level, bro time, guys' night. It's just, and I'd be willing to bet, especially, if you're a guy married to a woman, or any partner, I should say, really would appreciate more genuine communication.
Hmm.
How much more, how much better will that conversation go, Dean, if you began to talk to your wife about how you were feeling, or why maybe you haven't seen these guys in a little while, what's going on in their lives that you're
Hmm.
curious about, what's going on in your life that you want to share with them. And this could just be like an extra sentence or two. If we just
Hmm.
open up a little bit more to our partners as to the truth of what is going on, the frequency, infrequency, and meaning behind wanting to get together,
Hmm.
I would be willing to bet that conversation would go a lot smoother. We would be met with a lot less potential friction or stress, or resistance to, why do you want to go out with them? You always want to do this. You're just wanting to leave. You're leaving me here with the baby. Blah
Mm.
blah 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 blah. I'd be willing to bet a little bit more open communication would go a long way, and you'll find that there's no need to lie. There's no need to get away, and you
Mhm.
actually can get rewarded for opening up to how you actually feel and why you want to do something.
Mhm.
What that does then is allows me, by making my communication better, makes my, me checking in with me better. But it then also prompts me to have an actual intention going into hanging out with these guys instead
Mhm.
of running away from home and just escaping to wherever we can meet up, at the closest convenience, it has the best happy hour or whatever.
Mhm.
I'm actually going into that experience much more clear of why
Mhm.
and how I'm feeling. I just told my wife, I told myself, it's been X amount of days, X amount of months, X amount of years since I've seen this person, why this person is so meaningful to me, why I want to reconnect with them, what we're going to do, that I then go into that experience with an intention. And I
Mhm.
think anything we do in life, if we have even just like the tiniest bit of intention and awareness as to why we are stepping into it and what we hope to get out of it, you are going to get something out of it
Mhm.
beyond going into an experience just being present. Not to say that's not totally true, but if you go into something with this is my intention,
Mhm.
odds are you're going to walk away fulfilling that intention. And also, what I think happens here long term when we go about things in the other way of just escaping and getting away without intention, without proper communication, is months, years later, we are just feeding resentment. We are
Mhm.
feeding like, do you know how many times the guys asked me to go out and I didn't? Do you know how many times like I wanted to stay out and
Mm.
just stay out
Yeah.
later or do something different? Or how many things I turned down because I knew you wouldn't let me, or you wouldn't want me to go away from the baby or the move or the whatever. That's not fair to us or to them. What
Mhm.
we are doing by denying communication, just a minor level of communication and intention setting, is we're feeding resentment. And
Mhm.
resentment is something that just boils up and spills over and just poisons and ruins so many relationships, or it's just going to cause an unnecessary blow up in my experience
Mhm.
that we can get ahead of by doing exactly what I'm talking about now.
Yeah. I mean, that hits hard with me. I know Marissa and I, my wife and I, when we had our first child, there was a ton of resentment between us that we really had to, we really had to go in detail. We really had
Mm,
to I'm quite open about this, but I have a behavioral cognitive behavioral therapist, so I see a psychologist once a week myself. And starting probably a couple of years ago, my wife and I started seeing a couples counselor, not because like we were like, oh shit, this marriage is like ending if we don't see someone,
mm,
but like,
mhm.
hey, I would like to have a nice marriage. Would you like to have like a C plus marriage, or do you want to have like an A plus marriage?
Great for you guys.
And that's where like, to me that was what couples counseling would help with. But during those conversations, we uncovered just how much resentment we had, that we were
Wow.
that we were hiding. And this goes back to what you and I were talking about earlier in suppressing emotions,
Mhm,
because I suppress emotion because I don't want to bring up things that could potentially make my partner upset. But in so doing, I am building up resentment for myself. So by not expressing that, I'm making things worse. And it took
mhm,
me a while to, and it's still something that I struggle with on, a weekly basis. But I have to look at, my discontent, or like my frustrations, not as something to cover up because I don't want to make somebody upset, but instead as something that I need to express, because if I don't, I am, building up this resentment, which is going to make my partner upset. And the I think what really holds, what's really tough is getting to the point, or having the courage to be able to say those things, and meet that initial response, which is like, oh no,
mhm,
it's like, it's just what I thought it was going to be. She's upset. But if you keep going, if you keep having that difficult conversation, eventually you'll get to the point where, oh, this is like the real emotion that's behind it. This is like what's really happening. It's not that you want to get away,
yep,
it's that you need this other thing.
yep.
Or so
Good
but
on you
that's
guys, man. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing.
yeah, I mean, but that's really hard to do. It takes a lot of courage, and it's something that, like, it doesn't get easier. At least we kind of have done this enough times where we do have we know that we've done this in the past, and hopefully,
Mhm.
you know I think the initial fear for me was like, if I have this conversation, she is going to divorce me. Like it's going to like go to
Yeah,
the other
we
end.
jump to like the worst case scenario,
Right. Which is totally
whether we've been there
irrational.
before and we've been burned by relationships before. Maybe someone did divorce us or break up with us before, but you know
Hmm.
what? You have to look at it as that would have ended if you sharing what was truly on your mind, truly on your heart, and presented in a non-hurtful way, a respectful form
Hmm.
of communication. If that resulted in that other person leaving, of course, that's no fun. That's going to hurt. But I'm going to tell you right now, that person was going to leave. It was just a matter of time. Here
Hmm.
is your opportunity to deepen and to nurture, first and foremost, the relationship. I'm saying you, but anyone listening here with the same concept. Deepen and nurture the relationship with trust you have with yourself first, because what you're doing right there is you're teaching yourself that I can trust my emotions. I can trust this instinct. I can trust this thing inside of me enough to share out loud with myself, but also with this person that I have made this ultimate choice with to share my life with.
Hmm.
And if that is not the container for expressing those emotions and those feelings, then I don't know what is,
Yeah.
honestly. There's a totally different, unique aspect. I think we can take this and model it and put it, in this concept of guys' relationships as well. I mean, look, if you've
Hmm.
got your guys, your bros, your homies, if you've got, this group of gentlemen that, if you can't share some stuff like this with, then, honestly, there's no other container that, really I think is going to be as meaningful as that. And you would really be surprised. You're going to walk away. And just like I was saying earlier, like, I did it. I said it. I shared it. And you know what? I didn't die.
Hmm.
My guys didn't leave me. My wife didn't leave me. My partner didn't leave me. It takes this level of personal trust first for
Hmm.
us to be able to continuously apply courage and to learn that we're going to be safe and okay with ourselves and with these partners as well.
Hmm. And I found that the more that I have these conversations that I'm so afraid of, those are the opportunities that make your relationship stronger. Like I even do this now,
Mm.
but I don't think I seek out conflict deliberately, but I don't shy away from, or I sense when I'm shying away from a conversation with
Good, good. Yeah, you
somebody in
don't
my
avoid it.
life. And I'm like, I'm shying away from this. Like there's something that's like holding me back. Like I'm spending energy not having this difficult
Huge
conversation,
catch, man. Huge catch.
when really, if I have this conversation, not only am I freeing up like mental and emotional energy, but this is also an opportunity for me to have a deeper
Hmm.
relationship with this person that I am struggling with. And this isn't just with my wife. This is also with like my team members. Like if I'm having like a tiff with my web developer,
Mm.
and I know that I'm like, why am I not talking with him directly right now? I'm going to call him because like we need to work through this. Or like if
Hmm.
I notice
Hmm.
that like my COO hasn't had like a really isn't is behaving a certain way, I'm like, I recognize this pattern. He's not sharing something with me. I need to call him and get him to tell him what's on my mind so that we can work through this.
Dude,
So
we need more friends like you, man. That's a huge realization. I mean, and what you're doing, this is what I love about self-work, self-development, all the stuff we've been talking about here, is that the more often we do it with ourselves and for ourselves, it not only makes ourselves, I don't want to say better, but we get closer and closer and closer to the
mhm,
version of ourselves that I think we all truly innately know is in there. We're just shedding the layers that no longer
mhm,
serve us, and we're learning how to step into our truth and speak our truth
mhm,
because we now know what it feels like. But then you also get this other side of it that you pick up on it in other people. You pick up on these mannerisms and feelings and quirks and facial expressions and tonality and even verbiage and language, spoken or in text or email, whatever, that I'm sure you're talking about here, that you can really peel through the veil and go, it is not about this thing. It is
mhm,
something else. It's something behind it. This emotion, this lack of trust or safety that they are feeling that is causing them to speak and act in a way. And I know this because I've been there. I
mhm,
recognize this because the more that I recognize things in myself that I'm working on and shedding, the better and more often I can work or I can recognize and share these things with other people. And I'm sure, man, that's got to make your communication then with your COO and your developer actually efficient and fruitful, instead of just if it's another guy, just being machismo and just like throwing egos around and one party trying to be right over the other. That's not going to serve either one. And so, I mean, I think that is a level of masculinity that a lot of guys probably don't recognize or respect enough to practice enough, because we might think it's too soft, it's too gentle. My masculinity is maybe being challenged by my COO acting in a way, or thinking they whatever can get away with this. No, I promise you, like, there is a necessity in this initial softness of masculinity that is very firm and is very present, and is very rock solid. It doesn't have to look like or feel like anything else maybe we think it needs to look like or feel like. It needs to look like and feel like us. And what does masculinity feel like in us? And how can we accurately and efficiently share that information so that we can be present as our full male masculine selves, so that it does the same thing for another guy? Guys, humans mirror other humans. And so if this man is acting in a way and standing firm, but being very particular with his language, and is being rock solid in his values and what he needs and wants, but has a gentleness in how he is saying it, that is an incredible model for all of us other guys out there.
Yeah. A big reason why I kind of started this podcast was I think we needed to start thinking about masculinity in a different way. Like not just like the hard aspects of masculinity, like grit, determination, hard work, like stoicism, but also like the other aspects of masculinity. And not only will it make us more effective men, but it will also help us be healthier, happier, more fulfilled. I think there's this idea that we can reach our levels of happiness that we want by doing, subconsciously, by doing the things that we've, again, subconsciously learned, which is, get the amazing partner, get the awesome job, make a lot of money, and you'll, get the perfect body, and then you'll be set. Right. And, and then people get there and we're like, oh, you know what? This doesn't feel as good as I thought it would.
Yeah.
So
it's really, I don't know why this analogy of a sponge popped in my mind, but what you're just talking about kind of prompted this picture. We really are kind of like the two-sided sponge, like you're washing your dishes and, you need that hard, abrasive Brillo,
men
rough,
don't wash
tough
dishes.
I'm telling you, if you want your marriage to go better, you wash some damn dishes.
Oh, I wash lots of dishes. I'm the best dishwasher
I had this
in this
guest on
house.
recently. He blew my mind with this thing called chore play. Think of all the chores, non-typical foreplay. It's all chore play. You helping out in the dishes is chore play. I love that concept. But we do need, both need to exist. Both do exist. It's just a matter of which side, which version needs to be used right now. Do we need to be hard, rough, tough, abrasive exteriors because that is what the job demands? Or knowing that it's okay to just, flip over to our other side and just, relax a little bit, and, we can still get the job done. Absolutely. But we can go about it maybe in a softer way, in a more delicate way. Maybe it might take a little bit longer, but you know what? We're going for the long haul here. We're playing the long game. We're not trying to just scrub something down to its core as fast as possible. Both sides do exist. Masculinity is not just rough, tough, hard all the time. It is this knowing that we have the ability to lean into both sides of that, all versions, and we can still get it done.
So something I wanted to ask you, and something that I asked my last guest, you being in military, this last guest we had is a doctor. What's something that, people don't understand about people who are either active or past service men or women that would help us have better empathy with them, or that you as a, former, um, former military
Army. Yeah.
what's something that we would be helpful for the general population to know that they probably don't recognize?
Man, what a powerful question. I have so many things going through my mind right now. A couple of things. Maybe I can just say a couple of quick things. We tend, for the most part, to do better with very specific instructions. We're used to getting orders. We're used to a chain of command. We're used to yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Clear expectations, clear rules of engagement, if you will, and also very clear markers for success. This is what success looks like. This is what we're willing to sacrifice, or this is what anything kind of look like to get along the way to that success. And my wife sometimes she'll flat out say like, Sergeant Chewning, like, listen, pay attention, to kind of like dial me in.
Probably works.
Sometimes we just need it. Just, hey, instead of just big picture stuff, I hope you would pick up on this, and I hope you would do this. It's, I need this done by this time at this place, and it needs to look like this. When I hear that information, I get it. I'm like, okay, cool. I can lock in. I'm like, I got it.
I saw this GIF last week or a couple weeks ago that said, if your wife says something like, hey, whenever you get a chance, can you do this? She actually means, if you don't do this within the next 2 seconds, you're in trouble. I'm like, that is accurate.
Yeah. Good cue as well.
Yeah.
And another thing I want to say, I'm trying to like prioritize all the things flowing through my head, but I'll say, for the most part in my experience, and I served 03 to 09, but I think really anybody that has served, honestly, in the past 20 years, we have had a lot of expectations fall short. We have been through a lot, some more than others. We have been through some experiences and such a unique time in American history and such a unique time in world history that I think made a lot of us feel some kind of way in terms of, not to get super political or dogmatic, but like, what are we fighting for? Why did I serve my country? Or this isn't the mission that I signed up for. This isn't the country I signed up for. Or, I've been, scorned. I gave so much, what's the phrase? All gave some gave all.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is, always going to be true for the military, whether you're at war or in peace. But we've just basically, what I'm trying to say is we've been through a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of us in those experiences, whether you're in for a few years or full like 20 and retire, we need and want, a lot of us just have a hard time asking for it. We need and want help. We need and want to not have this harsh view of the world or this harsh view on reality. We need and want really the next mission. And a lot of us struggle with asking for that. A lot of us struggle with asking for help around that. A lot of us struggle with the transition from military life to civilian life again. And it's because of a lot of these experiences that we've had, and more specifically, being shuttled around, and especially when it comes to our health, like the medical system, service level is great. We get free healthcare, but basically I can't tell you how many times I get passed off from one primary care provider to another, and I got to retell my entire life story, or they haven't looked at a record, or, we just get subpar treatment or whatever. And that it grows in us a certain level of distrust with a lot of people, and feeling like you're not going to stick around. You don't really care about me. So we're latching on to wanting to continue and serve in a certain way and like have purpose and meaning in life. But a lot of times the experiences we've had don't allow that to happen because, we've been passed off, we've been shuttled around, and we don't have that team of brothers and sisters. I think the biggest through line we've had this entire conversation, I'm just going to say brotherhood here for what we're talking about. But had some incredible relationships, lifelong friendships now with women I've served with. But, guys, like once we don't have that anymore, it really does take a number on us. It really does affect us in a way I don't think a lot of us fully realize. And so that's ultimately what we're after. And detached from the military aspect here, I think I'll make the argument that that's really what we're all after. We're all after having meaning in life. We're all after having purpose and mission. We're all after having meaningful relationships and human connection all along the way. It's just we come packaged in a different way because for years we were taught one thing, we lived a certain way, and then all of a sudden, quite literally overnight, that's gone. That's totally different. And so it's a struggle, and
So the
a lot of
transition
us are
is like
struggling.
really jarring.
Yeah, I think the number one problem affecting service members now is the transition from active duty, from serving in the military, going back to civilian life. Because when you think about it, I enlisted, right? So I went to boot camp for a couple months. Officers, they go through certain forms of training, usually over a couple of years, a couple, weekend here, week there kind of thing. But, we spend a long time. I'm going to say, enlist from my experience. I spent months transitioning from civilian way of thinking and living to military way of thinking and living. I was quite literally, it was drilled into me for months and months and months. And then to get out, they probably spent about maybe 3 days of just like sign up for this course, out process there, make sure you know how to build a resume, get your, medical records so you can get healthcare. That's about it. There's no like downshifting from military way of thinking back to civilian way of thinking and acting and talking and verbiage and, even experience the way that it is from civilian into military. And that is a huge detriment. I got out in 2009, and I talk to people now transitioning out now that they have the same problems, the same pain points. Their struggles were my struggles back then, and like God, it's been so long, and we're still dealing with these issues. So I know I probably went all over there with that question, but because there are just so many places to go with that question. But ultimately, we want meaning, we want purpose, we want direction, we want to serve, but we want to know that we have trusted people around us along the way. We want to know that we're doing something, supporting a mission, but we have people who have our backs along the way, because that ultimately is a huge issue with the transition stuff as well, is that we lose that brotherhood, that sisterhood, that camaraderie, that, this sensation and knowing of trust that, hey, I have people to the left and right of me that if shit hits the fan in any capacity, they've got my back. No matter what, I'm not getting left behind. And we just don't have that. We
Yeah.
just don't have that in the civilian world.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you sharing that with me. That's yeah, it sounds like it's difficult. I don't know what else to say. And,
It is. And unfortunately, it's too difficult for a lot of people. Two of my, I call them brothers, two of my closest relationships and friends ever. Two brothers that I served with, that was just too much for them to bear. And, once they got out, they unfortunately hit the statistic and, of the unfortunate amount of service members that we lose to suicide, and they both took their own lives. And it's
wow.
just quite literally the last conversations I had with them were around, I have no meaning. I have no purpose, like civilian life. Like, what am I doing? It's just, I'm not supported. I can't go on. And then, they feel like that burden is too much to bear, and they took their own lives. And I know they're not alone. Unfortunately, this is something that happens every damn day.
Yeah. It's 20 a day, right? Is that
22.
22
Yeah.
a day? Wow. That's crazy.
22 suicides a day by
And there's
service
how
members,
many?
veterans.
There's like 2 or 3 million. There's like two million people in the army, or across all armed forces. Like, what's the total number of active service
Oh, I'm
people?
not sure right now. Yeah, I couldn't tell you right now. We could do a quick fact check, I guess. But
But we got to Google this current
yeah.
number of active servicemen in U.S. Okay, there's 500,000 people in the U.S. That's just the Army, though. So,
Mm.
add up the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines.
Yeah, that's just each branch.
Yeah. So there's over, I mean, that's like, 1 mil, I don't know. Let's just say it's 2 million out of 300 million people. That's whatever, 1 in 150 people or whatever my
Mm.
math is. It's a lot of people going through
It's too
that.
many. It's too many. And
Yeah.
in my opinion, look, the root cause of someone who chooses to take their own life, I don't know if we'll ever fully understand, but I would argue that I think majority is mental health, is a poor mental health state. And I do believe for a lot of military members and a lot of men in the military, that reasoning is what I just shared. That brotherhood is gone.
Mm.
That trust is gone. That meaning and purpose is gone. That next mission is gone. And when you go year after year after year, some people, 15, 20 years of that being your truth and knowing that level of trust is there to just quite literally, Dean, the next day you sign out and it's gone.
Yeah.
That's it's a mind fuck, man. Like, and
Right.
it's a very harsh reality that I I'm very grateful for the situation in which that I went through, that I transitioned out of the military. Like I suffered some really gnarly injuries, career-ending injuries that ultimately my last about year and a half. We talked about this a lot in the last episode. About the last year and a half of my military career, of my 6 years, I was a patient and I was in a very special medical hold unit, just getting surgeries and rehabilitating. But I had about 15 months basically to kind of come to terms with, not only is my life totally different now, but my career is over.
Mm.
I was already deemed non-deployable, which means you're just going to heal and we're going to kick you out. So I knew the end was coming. So I had
Yeah.
about a 15-month transition of just kind of wrapping my head around that before I actually got to like the 3 days I was sharing of what they actually do to transition you out.
Hmm.
That is, not everybody gets. And so I kind of felt like I had a unique situation, and what I went through definitely really sucked. But, I'm very grateful that I was able to wrap my head around that sooner than a lot of other people, because I do believe that helped my transition in a big way, so that when I did sign out for the last time and I left base for the last time and I drove back home, that I was already partially assimilated back to civilian life and the way of thinking and living and acting, that that has really served me. Because when I talk to other service members that do have that day, one day I'm in, one day I'm out kind of thing, we're
Hmm.
radically different. And so for that, I'm very grateful.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that with me, and helping us better understand the same things that you and your fellow brothers have been going through and sisters have been going through. So, on that note, I think this was an awesome conversation. I think we've gone through a lot of, we shared a lot of common experiences that I think a lot of men are having, but we also talked about a lot of ways and practices that we could to work on those things. So hopefully this, if you're listening, I hope this gives you some
Mm,
ideas on how you can implement some of these changes in your own life. Hopefully it gives you the bravery to express your emotions, starting first with understanding your own emotions and then being able to articulate to those to people intelligently, emotionally intelligently, to
mm-hmm,
people that you trust,
mm-hmm.
and ultimately, hopefully, being able to create stronger connections as a result of that. Um, Chase, what's some of the best ways for people to follow you? Ever Forward Radio, all that stuff.
Yeah. Everforward Radio is my podcast. That's what I do now. I've been doing it for a little over 6 years. So if anything you've liked what I've been talking about here today from me, I do solo episodes now on the show as well. But primarily it's interviews with people that are bringing just like leading information and curiosities around physical, mental, emotional, spiritual well-being. All the
Mm,
ways that my brand is called Ever Forward. It's this phrase from my late father. And I say, help us live a life ever forward. And it's being aware of all these pieces of our pie, not just the physical self, but everything else, internally as well. So
mm,
Ever Forward Radio is available anywhere and everywhere you listen or watch podcasts. And then Instagram primarily at Chase_Chewning is where just every day I'm sharing experiences and thoughts just like this. I kind of say Instagram is where I flesh out all the feelings and emotions and
mm,
practices and things that I'm going through in my life, that I want to share. And then the podcast is where I dive deeper in a longer format, whether, solo or with an expert or a thought leader or community leader or somebody like that.
Yeah. You're one of those guys. Sometimes I see your Instagram story and there's so many small lines that I'm like, I don't even know how many stories are here because the lines are so small that like, I don't know if there's 50 or 250.
I get a little carried away sometimes. Like I said, I like to talk. I like to share. But I'll say this: everything I put out has an intention behind it. I'm sharing something to show and to share a very specific piece of information, a resource, a clinical study, a product, a service, or whatever, or is just literally just me experiencing life. And if you pay attention, even for just 24 hours, you're going to see why and how everything I share and do stacks up, and what it's doing to support me moving forward in life, and being aware of and nurturing relationships, and being aware of and nurturing, my physical health, mental health, spiritual health, all of that. It all matters. The human experience is the most multifaceted thing I think we can ever look at on planet Earth. And to say that we can compartmentalize any of it and that any of it does not contribute to the same level, I think is a big shortcoming. So I am a unique human being. You're a unique human being. Everything you do or don't do, say or don't say, eat or don't eat, whatever, contributes to how you look, how you feel, how you show up for yourself and for the world.
Mm-hmm. Well, there you got it. You've got the 24-hour Chase Chewning Instagram challenge to
Roll
go
through.
do
Come on
when
by.
this is done.
Yeah.
Experience the full range of human experience as told by Chase Chewning. Guys, thank you for
coming
joining
soon
me.
to a theater near you.
Hey, that would be a long movie. Guys, thanks for joining me for the Better Man podcast. Tuning in, Chase, as always, thanks so much for joining on and being vulnerable.
My pleasure.
And sharing all your thoughts. Guys, I hope this inspires you to be a better man, and I'll see you on the next episode. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to get more of Chase Chewning, check out Ever Forward Radio. He has an extremely popular podcast. Last time I checked, with over 4 million downloads. You can listen to that wherever you like to listen to podcasts. He's also had a ton of really cool guests there. So check it out. I think that you'll be able to get something out of that. If you haven't already, please consider leaving a review for the Better Man podcast. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you can do that on Apple Podcast, on Spotify, on Google Podcast. We're getting really close to 100 reviews on Apple Podcasts, so I'd really appreciate it if you can help me out there. Lastly, if you haven't already, if you're struggling to implement some of what we talk about in the Better Man podcast, one of the best ways to do that is by getting into a habit of consistent exercise. And I think the easiest way to do that, and one of the most effective, low impact ways of doing that, is through the Manful Yoga app and members area. That makes it easy for you to get started, to sign up, to follow a set path of programs, and get really noticeable results in the first few weeks. You'll also feel accomplished about yourself when you're doing these workouts, and you'll finish feeling way better than you started. Your joints are going to feel a lot better. Your posture is going to be better. You're going to be in a better mood. And that happens in the first few weeks. It doesn't take months for that to happen. We also have a brand new Getting Started guide, which is awesome for helping you get into the habit of doing these workouts consistently, getting over roadblocks, understanding common problems that guys have with these, and just making it easier. So you can learn more and sign up at mfy.tv/join. Thanks, guys, for listening to this, and I hope it inspires you to be a better man. If you like that episode, check out this other one right here. I think you're really going to enjoy it. If you haven't subscribed, click this subscribe button over here, and you can listen to the full episodes on any major podcasting platform. Full details below in the description.